We're going to come out here to the command line now, and we are going to run our executable here. Java ee333.user_driver, and we are going to provide to it then the switch import custom, as well as one of our file names. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to provide it with the sample.user. And you'll see here then that we get a null pointer exception. And more importantly, our import custom returned false, which means that we've got a little bit of troubleshooting that we have to do. And we know that it happened inside of our import custom. This is one of the reasons why it's important to go ahead and set up some system.out.print lines, letting you know where you are roughly in your, whether you're in your main or in one of your calling functions. In this case, we know that one of our system.out.print line, our exception.toStrings, is resulting in output to the console. But also, more importantly, we know that our import custom returned false. So we've just got to work backwards to figure out where that import custom returned false. This is as a result of this line right here. So we know that something is going wrong either in our import custom, the one that is in our user driver.java, or in our call to our ee333.user import custom. So what we want to do is we want to take an opportunity to do a little bit of debugging here. The first place that you want to put a breakpoint then would be on line 70. You also want to come over here to your import custom and start by putting a breakpoint somewhere. We don't have a great idea yet of where the error is. We know roughly that it's probably inside here. So what we can do then is we can simply just put a breakpoint somewhere in this section of code right here. So we'll start with our line 39. And then the last thing that we want to do is we want to go here to our user driver. We want to go to the properties. We want to go to run, and the same arguments that you would have put in the command line. So I'm going to try to put these both up here for just a second. The same arguments that you would have put here in the command line, the /import custom sample user, they need to go in the arguments of under the run tab here. So there we go, our import custom sample users. So at this point, we're set up for debugging. One little minor note is that there was a typo in the earlier video where I had checked the first column, or essentially the first value that resulted from the string split, which basically separated our strings, our lines, by the colon space. So we're splitting here by the colon space. And so earlier in the video, you would have noticed that the code checked the chunks square brackets 0, and then also tried to use chunks square brackets 0. So please note that you're checking the first portion of the string, in other words, chunks square bracket 0, to see if the tag essentially matches, and then you're using the second part. So please make a quick note of that, we're essentially checking the first part to see that it matches either the ID, the first name, or so on, and then we're capturing then the second part. All right, so let's go ahead and go back here to our user driver. We've saved everything, and now let's go ahead and debug this project. See if we can figure out where the issue is. All right, so we now have the green arrow here on our first breakpoint. At this point, I don't think there's any issues. You can come down here to our variables window. You can type in a new variable to check, see the value of it. You'll see right now that it also is, there's some common variables, or the ones that are in scope are already listed. So there's our input file, input buffer reader, and so on. There's our line, and basically we've got the variables that are in use right now, are in scope. So I'm going to step into this, which should take us then over to our user.java. And we'll go ahead and actually what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and continue into the next debug point here. Let's see here, we're going to hit continue. All right, and then step. This is just the initialization inside of our import custom. At this point, we can just hit continue. It seems to, for some reason, be jumping over our breakpoint here. Let's go ahead and move that up to line 38. Let's go back here. Let's debug our project one more time. And we're going to hit continue. There we go. Now we're hitting our chunks.length. All right. Not sure what was going on there, why it was jumping over our previous breakpoint. I have seen that before in NetBeans. Sometimes you just have to choose another breakpoint. Basically, it seems to reset the debugger. In this case, we're going to step into our first line. We can actually check what the line itself is by coming down here and just simply typing in lines, and you'll see then that lines, if you expand this out, you'll actually see the entire collection of lines. Lines square brackets 0 then is going to be our G Myers. In this case, you'll notice here that the lines, the collection of lines, represents all of the lines in the string that was passed, so this custom string. So if you come up here, type in custom string, or you search for it, you'll see that it's all of the information. And you'll notice that we have a mistake. Okay, so if you see here, our custom string essentially matches our /n. You should note that I have double quotes around the /n. And you'll see then that the lines then has basically a collection of strings with each line from the sample.user in its own element in the array. Likewise, if you've noticed here that our chunks 0, when we split an individual line by the colon equals, the chunks should then be, ideally if we have a correctly formatted file, should have 2 elements, and in this case should separate out the what is essentially the tag with the data. And so for this particular case, then we should ideally get our chunks compare to ignore case should return then a match. And so if you see here that this is true, and then if we continue, if we step into this, then we should then successfully be assigning our chunks square brackets 1 to our ID. All right, so at least for the first one, that seems to work, and we're going to follow through with a few of these. The next line should technically capture the first name, so that seems to be working. And once again, you can come down here to your variables here, and you can type in to search or add a new one. You'll see that my ID is now Gregory, my first name, my ID, pardon me, should be G Myers, and my first name should be Gregory. We would expect some similar behavior. And so what we can do then is we can go ahead and put another breakpoint much further down. And we'll actually go ahead and put a breakpoint inside of both our try catch here, particularly the try, and we'll see if we can figure out where our problem is here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. I'll go ahead and take I'll go ahead and leave the breakpoint here. You can take it off, but it's going to stop then every time we break one of the lines into chunks. And you keep on going here. Let's see what we get. Eventually, so if you're checking your chunks as you go along here, our chunks, we're at status now. So ideally, when I hit continue this time, I should get the I should hit this breakpoint right here, and we'll step into this. So there's our status is equal to, in this case, what we want to do is we want to check to see what the value of chunks square brackets 1 is, and it is unknown. So ideally, then this would convert from a string of unknown into the enumerator unknown, and it comes down here and it checks, it goes into the enum.java, which at this point then we can step through, or we can simply hit continue, which should take us then back to our import custom, but we're still throwing a java.lang.null pointer exception. So we at least know that we have gotten this far without any issues. So let's go ahead and remove these breakpoints. And let's go ahead and put a breakpoint now inside of our try here, and then, excuse me, inside of our catch. Let's try this one more time. So we're going to get started. We're going to go ahead and hit continue. And we seem to be jumping over that particular catch. So what that means is that whatever is throwing this exception is not happening in here. And we could have picked up on that if you notice that we should have a java.lang.illegal argument exception is the type of exception that we're expecting to catch here, not a java.lang.null pointer exception. So that gets back into the types of exceptions that a particular try catch would work with. So that means one of two things is either this is throwing an error that we hadn't expected, or that our exception is coming from somewhere else. So let's take a second now to go back to our user driver and see if we can track this down. Let's take our breakpoint off of here and let's put it on 71. Let's go ahead and debug our project once more. And we'll note that we do not yet see the exception. So the exception seems to actually be happening in our export, not in our import. And so what we want to do now is we want to come over here to our variables. We want to take a look at our temp variable. So we have our temp, and it is equal to null. All right, well, it's equal to null, but it was supposed to be assigned by our ee333.user.importCustom. So it means that what's happening is we're passing a null value to our system.out.print line. Now, fortunately, in this particular case, it turns out that our error was rather kind of silly. If you once again go back to our import custom, you'll see that we did everything right aside from the minor parsing error where we use the 0 instead of the 1 with our chunks. If you scroll down real quick, you'll notice that we made all of this effort to create our temp user. And then down here at the end of our function, our factory function that essentially was supposed to generate the temp user, we failed to return the temp user. Okay, so your very last step here is to replace the null with temp user. The irony of this is that my very own comment was ignored. I put here that I needed to fix this, and then as we were working through it, as I was recording the video, I actually missed my own comment here. So once again, it's very important when you're doing this to go ahead and put some comments in for yourself. Ideally, you shouldn't ignore them. But more importantly is if you go ahead and set up your functions with the return value early on, you may actually avoid this problem. So if I were to do this over again, perhaps in private without trying to record, what I would do is I would probably go ahead and create up here a temp user and go ahead and set it equal to null, but then go ahead down here on the bottom is return that temp user. So just go ahead and wire up your functions early on. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop. I'm reasonably confident that we've at least made a significant step forward. Let's go ahead and save this. We'll go ahead and do a clean build on this. And then we'll come back over here to the command line and we'll see if we've accomplished anything here. So we'll go ahead and do a clean build. All right, it seems like I've got a file open here. There we go. I think that should get us out of the directory here. May not be necessary to do the clean and build, but it was just good for us to see how this works. All right, so build classes, and then let's go ahead and rerun our EE333 user driver. Now notice one thing is when we do the clean and build that we have to go ahead and copy our files back over. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and just grab my sample user and my sample XML, and then I want to paste them back here in my folder here. All right, so now when I do a dir, I should see all of them. And then when we run our Java E333.user driver, I'm going to have my sample user in the folder, and I want to do my import custom sample.user. And now you see that my import custom returned true. You'll also see that all of my fields were populated. So in this case, we have now successfully returned the temp user that our factory function here, this import custom has created for us. So we're returning a user. But also, more importantly now, if you go back to your user driver, you'll notice that I am not only printing out the value, the return value from temp.exportCustom, which if you recall from the earlier video, we opted to have it go ahead and return the string. But now this string right here, this export custom string from temp is now ready to be used in our export method that will actually export to the file. Okay, so now then what our last step to sort of close the circle on this, close the loop on this, is to go back to our export example that we did earlier, our export custom. We said that we could either do this manually or we could just simply make a call to export custom all. All right, so the thing that we want to test here is, are we successfully adding this user that we imported? Are we successfully adding it to that array list? And the easiest way to check that would just simply be to do EE333.user.exportCustom.all. And we could go ahead and capture the return value just like we did down here. So we could just simply do a system.printout and then capture all of the output from this function. Now, if we save this, we come back over here one more time to our console, run this, and our import custom returned true. And we have our sample.user and our sample.xml. Apparently didn't build that one. In this case, let's do it one more time. But now you'll notice that I get an extra prompt here, the ID. If you recall from the earlier video, we opted to trim down the output from the export custom all that would be printed to the console by virtue of being returned from that function. But if you do a dir now, you see a gmyers.user. And so essentially what we've done is we have imported our sample user, and we have ideally correctly exported it to gmyers.user. I didn't have to specify a file name because what I did is I simply used the ID as the file name. All right, so hopefully you found this video useful. If you've got any questions or comments, don't hesitate to email me. In a later video, I am going to tackle two other features from this user driver. One that's already here, that is the ability to import the XML. The second one I would like to be able to do is I'd like to be able to import all of our .user files from a single directory. I'm going to go ahead and stop here. This video, by the way, is meant to be in conjunction with the earlier video that got stopped prematurely. Ultimately, if you're listening to this, I may have went ahead and combined the two videos just to avoid confusion.